Welcome to Beyond the Curve, providing strategic insights on international business and international law. I'm Jeffrey O'Brien, alongside my co-host, Dr. Adriana Sanford. Dr. Adriana Sanford has 6 years of law school, including a double LLM in taxation and international comparative law from Georgetown University and a law degree from Notre Dame. She currently is working on her latest degree, an executive MBA in global management from the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Dr. Sanford has represented numerous multinationals, serving both as in-house and as external primary U.S. counsel. Good morning, Dr. Sanford.
Good morning, Jeffrey.
With us this morning is Dr. John Mathis. He's a world-renowned economist known for his global perspective and expertise related to the finance and banking industry and current economic and financial crisis. He's a professor of global banking and finance, and he's the director of Global Finance Services Center at Thunderbird School of Global Management. Dr. Mathis has written and edited several books that become widely used, including Corporate Financial Management and Offshore Lending by U.S. Commercial Banks, broadly recognized as the definitive work on international banking and country risk analysis. Good morning, Dr. Mathis.
Good morning.
Dr. Mathis, what do you think we need here in the United States to stimulate meaningful economic recovery?
Well, we are getting recovery. The U.S. economy is actually recovering. It's just not as fast as, we'd like it to reduce unemployment more quickly. And if we want to get it faster, we need to make changes that are permanent, because temporary changes, they play with expectations and people don't respond properly. So we need permanent changes. And normally we would use fiscal policy, but this time around we've got a constraint on fiscal policy. We've just got too much debt, and therefore we don't want to spend more government money, which creates more debt. So then the only option that is left is to begin to cut taxes, thereby giving people more funds to spend. And as they spend more, that drives consumption, that drives companies producing more goods to satisfy consumer demand. They have to hire more. And in fact, that is happening, but just not fast enough.
Well, how would you handle labor productivity? I mean, how do we tackle employment there?
Well, employment is an interesting thing. So far, most of the proposals I've heard are short-term solutions rather than long-term solutions. The problem with short-term solutions is we put people in jobs that are very low productive jobs. They don't require a lot of skill. They employ people quickly and give them money. But from a long-term competitive position of the United States, we actually hurt ourselves, because we don't create high-value-added jobs. High-value-added jobs mean that we produce products that have a lot of value in them, and when we sell them, therefore, the return is a high multiple of the effort spent. The result of that is labor actually gets more money. But to get to that stage, away from short-term into kind of a long-term solution for the unemployment problem, we really need to better prepare people for higher value-added jobs. And better prepare them means they need to attend more education, more schools for a longer period of time, elevate their skill levels, become a little bit more quantitatively oriented, and able to use more sophisticated technology or computers, which drives most of our manufacturing industry right now.
Right, and a lot of this actually is taking place overseas right now. We need to get it back here. As far as education, what is it that we're missing?
According to the OECD, Organization of Major Industrial Countries, U.S. has now slipped to someplace around the 20th best educator in the world, as opposed to number one.
Goodness.
And so other countries are doing a better job. Other countries actually have employment strategies that we do not have. And by that I mean they know they're dominant automobile producers. They train labor to be expert in that industry, and they're such experts in that industry that they have a global comparative advantage.
Right.
And so they just don't want to have a super automobile that's very competitive. They make it happen by putting people in the right school through the right training to set up almost like a supply chain of skilled labor that is there for a long-term push in the competitiveness in specific industries. We don't do that. Our dropout rates in high school and in college, community college, is extremely high. we have awful lot of immigrants that are coming into the system that are not as well trained as we need to step into higher productive jobs. So all that foundation needs to be corrected first. So instead of spending money on immediately repairing bridges and roads and things like that, which are like low-skilled jobs, we actually should spend money improving education, spend money on improving teacher skills, learning expertise, and provide an incentive for students to stay in school, get those higher skills, because they're going to earn higher income levels once they graduate.
Okay, so we understand we need higher skills training in both high school and on into college. What would you say are the top 3 areas that we need to see some serious improvement, become a player in the global landscape?
Well, one of the big ones that have been identified, and some good headroads are being made in this, and that is in mathematics, statistics, and quantitative skills. You know, problem solving, analytical analysis of different problems, that has become relatively weakened or absent in the U.S. after we had the big push to, get craft in space and explore different areas. Then it kind of slipped out of vogue, and consequently we shifted more toward soft skills. Soft skills don't create products, don't create well-trained individuals to give us a comparative advantage globally. We need to get back to, particularly then, the quantitative, the math, the statistics, things like that, the analytical thinking and problem-solving ability. We also know that the health area, the medical area, we need more training and people to stick in that area and go through it. And with the cost of college going up, then we need some sort of very, very low-cost loans to encourage students to go to school, and maybe even erase part of the loan if students finish school and go into certain careers where we know we want to build a comparative advantage.
Right, as an incentive.
That's a long-term labor strategy.
How long do you think it'll take?
To get employment strategy in place? Well, how long does it take to get a person through high school? That's 4 years. How long through college? That's another 4 years.
Right.
So there's 8 years.
I don't have to go back, do I?
Yes, we all do.
Oh,
repeatedly. It's a constant, retraining life right now. We're going to have, they call them 10, 12 careers. They're not really, dramatically switching professions, but we will have to go back and retrain because technology is just exploding so rapidly.
In order to compete, you have to.
Well, exactly that. And if we develop technology and then don't have the people to use it effectively, guess where it's going to go?
Right. That's what's so sad about it.
Yeah. So we do need to focus very seriously on training and the educational system. I mean, that needs to become a priority. And now, not later, now, we need people skilled to use technology effectively. The focus of fiscal policy or the focus of tax policy should be on providing a big incentive for young men and women to go to school, stay in school, complete their degrees, and then go on to very productive, well-paying jobs. Right now, the 16 to 19-year-old in that population group, they have the highest dropout rate in schools. They have the highest unemployment rate. And this is our future. Those are our future workers, 20 years down the road. And they're not in school. They're doing things outside of school. That is not going to help us long term. That's going to keep us uncompetitive. That is not part of a long-term labor strategy to strengthen the competitiveness of the U.S., keep jobs home, but have them be higher value-added jobs so that people make more money and therefore have a better standard of living.
Right now, we have a lot, of the population that lacks college. So incentives for them as well, or a net or something in order for them to be able to go out and get the right training.
Right. There's got to be an incentive to keep them in school. And right now, students that go to the top-rated schools, they walk out with extremely high debt levels. And it takes them a long time to pay that back. And that's kind of a disincentive. I mean, if I can go out and get a job and maybe earn $10 an hour, to pay for family expenses and when my father may be unemployed, I'm going to do that now out of necessity. We have to remove that kind of an incentive and shift it over to, encouraging schools to go to school, stay in school, and focus on what they're doing. Not give them the opportunity to get into the low-paying, low-skilled jobs right now.
So what are your thoughts on improving liquidity here in the United States, Dr. Mathis?
Well, that's an interesting issue. Typically, banking crisis, when they hit, and the U.S. is in the midst of a banking crisis from the subprime loan crisis, the banking crisis typically lasts an average of about 6 years, sometimes longer, depending on the situation. Japan has gone on much longer than that, as have some emerging markets. Let's say the U.S. is going to have a 6-year banking crisis, the average. Well, we're not in the 6th year yet. We have a couple more years to go before we're out of the crisis. What that means is that there's just not confidence enough in the banks to be able to increase their lending capacity and expand domestic credit creation. That is also being restricted by new regulations out of the Dodd-Frank bill and out of so-called Basel III, the global banking rules on what banks can do, in the sense that banks still have relatively large default rate on loans, and therefore they need to provision for those loans. What that does is mean they can't make new loans because they're putting the money they do make in reserve to offset losses on bad loans. That's still happening. Less serious than it was a couple of years ago, but it's still there. On the other end of the bank balance sheet, we have a problem with increased capital requirements. Well, capital comes from retained earnings or issuing stock. Well, until lately, the stock market for banks has not been very attractive, and bank earnings have not been very large either. So banks still need to put much more funds into satisfy capital adequacy requirements. Well, once you put what little earnings bank have, either in provisions or to build up capital, there's not much left to lend. And I don't know if any of you have tried to get a mortgage lately, but the rules are so restrictive now that it is extremely difficult to get a mortgage. It tends to take longer, there's more documentation, and all that means is a little bit more frustration, a little bit more cost of actually applying for the loan. So we need at least about a year and a half before the banking crisis is pretty close to being gone, and at that point liquidity will expand. We'll be in good shape. There's plenty of liquidity right now, but it's not going to the consumer. It's not going to industries unless you're an industry that has built up huge amounts of cash. You're using that to finance expansion. Some companies are actually making loans to other companies right now, particularly if a company is a supplier of the company with a lot of cash. So the supplier will be able to get a credit advance or a loan from the buyer of its product. And so there is another shadow finance market that is providing liquidity in the U.S. economy right now. Hard to get statistics on it to know how large it is, but it is helping because business investment, capital expansion, capital goods orders, the companies are actually doing good things, exactly what they need to be doing, just not enough of it, to spur economic activity in the U.S. and therefore reduce the unemployment rate.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that economic relief is on the way in the next couple of years. When we get to that point, what do you feel we need to do to keep it going?
Well, one thing we don't want to do is overregulate the financial services sector so that it raises the cost for consumers and companies to have to get access to capital. That's not a good plan. We do need some better regulations, but that doesn't necessarily mean more regulations. yes, we went through a serious crisis. We don't want it to happen again. And in fact, the Fed has changed how it is approaching the management of monetary policy. It didn't used to focus so much on price bubbles, so-called asset price bubbles, like stock market prices rising rapidly or oil prices rising rapidly or things like that, or real estate prices rising rapidly. It would watch them, but it wouldn't necessarily alter policy to change the direction of that unless there was a fundamental increase in inflation. Well, now what it's doing is it's watching asset prices much more carefully, and if it feels that they're going to get out of hand, stimulate inflation, it will actually take earlier action to cut that asset price bubble short from becoming a true bubble bursting and then causing, a financial crisis. So there's some encouraging trends in terms of we've learned a lot from the last crisis, and the Fed, I think, has better tools, better knowledge to prevent it from happening going forward.
Dr. John Mathis, thank you so much for your incredible insight. We do appreciate you. Dr. John Mathis from the Thunderbird School of Global Management.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, guys, we'll be back with more Beyond the Curve, providing strategic insights on international business and international law. We'll be right back after this.